All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for joining. I'm gonna go ahead and get us started right on time just because I want to make sure we have time for any questions throughout. Just a little bit of quick housekeeping. The chat is disabled, but there is a Q&A button where you can type in a question as we go through, and we'll be able to answer any questions you have that way. Quick introductions to get us started. I am Beth Nuttall. I am the Director of Grants and Programs at the Community Foundation of the Virgin Islands, and I'm joined by my colleague Demi. Demi, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, for sure. I can introduce myself. Hi.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Demi Trim. It's a pleasure to meet everyone. I am joining on board BI for the first time as a Grants and Programs Associate, so I work very closely with Beth. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you all, and we hope that this information session can be useful to everyone.
Great, thank you, Demi. So I will be running us through the presentation and Demi will be monitoring our Q&A. So feel free, if you have a question at any time, to just pop it in the Q&A box. We will see it and we'll either answer it as it comes in, or we'll also have time at the end for a Q&A session. So with that, I will go ahead and get us started. So the RFSI program, or the Resilient Food Systems Infrastructure program, if you hear RFSI, that's what we usually are referring to rather than saying the very long name. So CFVI was awarded a cooperative agreement from the USDA, and we will be sub-awarding a total of $1.5 million to the organizations in the territory to help build resilience in the middle of the supply chain and to strengthen local and regional food systems by creating new revenue streams for our producers. CFVI is working in partnership with USDA. They have a specific office for this RFSI program, and we will be sub-awarding competitive grants to food and farm businesses and other eligible entities. So what is the purpose of this funding? And this is very kind of niche funding, and it's also relatively new to us, so we're learning a lot, but we're excited to be able to get this money out and kind of help you all apply for it. So the purpose is to make competitive grants for projects to expand capacity and infrastructure for the aggregation, processing, manufacturing, storing, transporting, wholesaling, or distribution of targeted local agriculture products. So this is all focused on middle of the supply chain only, not end of the supply chain, which is retail, or beginning of the supply chain, which is kind of harvesting and growing. The program is intended to support food system crops and products that are meant for human consumption, and that includes any specialty crops, dairy, and grains for human consumption. Some of the ineligible products are meat and poultry products, wild-caught seafood, animal feed and forage products, fiber, landscaping products, tobacco, and dietary supplements. And the reason that these are ineligible is because those areas have access to funding already through different programs at the USDA. The middle of the supply chain and the other areas have access to less funding, so that's why this funding wants to support those areas. I know that wild-caught seafood would be a big one for us in the territory, but if there is seafood that is not wild-caught, maybe fish farming, anything like that, that would be eligible. So what is the middle of the food supply chain? So the USDA defines the middle of the food supply chain as activities that are taking place after the production of the agricultural product, but before it's been sold to consumers. So you can kind of look at the little image down here. We also have this on our website, if you ever want to reference it. And it's just highlighting the processing, packing, adding value, and shipping. Those are all considered middle of the supply chain. So these activities include processing, aggregation, and distribution of agricultural products between leaving the field and entering the marketplace. So essentially anything post-harvesting, not harvesting itself, but once the crop has left the field, that would be then an eligible activity. So the grant funds cannot be used for cultivation, harvest, or retail marketing of any of the eligible food products. So an example for a field-grown crop would be you can't use this funding for purchasing harvesting equipment or paying for labor, but after that product is out of the field, you could use it for washing, transportation, storage, or any kind of further processing. And you can't use it for any kind of grocery stores or retail type spaces. Those would not be eligible because that's considered end of the supply chain, like you can kind of see on the image right here. Demi, do we have any questions yet?
No questions so far.
Okay, great. And again, if anyone has questions as we go through this, please feel free to drop them in and we will try and answer them. So the priorities for this project, we're encouraging projects that benefit underserved farmers and ranchers, new and beginning farmers and ranchers, veteran producers and processors and other middle of the supply chain businesses that are owned by socially disadvantaged individuals. So there is a link on our website, which Demi, if you could drop in the chat for everyone, she'll put the link into our website that has all of the information, including the applications and everything. And I'll walk through that as well towards the end of this. But there is an online tool that will help you understand what you qualify for if you qualify for any of these different areas. So if it's underserved, the USDA qualifies that as anyone who has a total household income at or below the national poverty level. A beginning farmer is someone who has not operated a farm or a ranch, or they've operated it for no more than 10 consecutive years. A veteran, they qualify it as anyone who served in the US Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force, or Coast Guard, including the reserve components, and they were released from service under conditions other than dishonorable. And then the socially disadvantaged category for farmers or ranchers is any member of any socially disadvantaged groups. And the USDA lists those as American Indians or Alaskan Natives, Asians, Blacks or African Americans, Native Hawaiians or other Pacific Islanders, and Hispanics. And if you have an entity, if you have kind of multiple owners within this entity, you would have to have the majority, so more than 50% ownership in that business has to be held by socially disadvantaged individuals in order to qualify. Now, some of the different projects that are going to be prioritized are any projects that expand capacity for processing, aggregation, distribution of agricultural products to create more and better markets for producers. Any projects that improve the capacity of local entities to comply with federal, state, and local food safety requirements. Any projects that improve operations through training opportunities, or any projects that modernize processing and manufacturing equipment. These priorities were actually a result of surveys that went out earlier this year in January and February to the local farming communities, and the responses that we got, we kind of aggregated those, and these were the priorities that resulted from that. And if it doesn't meet that priority, it doesn't mean that it's not eligible. That's just kind of what we're focusing on supporting, but we will absolutely consider other eligible projects. So who is eligible to apply? This is actually very flexible funding compared to most of the work that CFEI usually does, which focuses on nonprofits. So there's more eligible applicant types, which is great. So they include agricultural producers or processors, nonprofit organizations. Now, if you're a nonprofit, you do have to have your 501c3 status with the IRS, and it has to be active. And we would also consider an organization that has local status, but can prove that they've submitted tax returns for the past 2 years. Also eligible are for-profit entities that meet eligibility requirements of the SBA's small business size standards. Again, there's a tool on our website to help you determine if you qualify for that or not. Local government entities, tribal governments, and institutions such as schools, universities, or hospitals bringing producers together to establish cooperative or shared infrastructure or invest in equipment that will benefit multiple producers. None of the projects are required to include multiple producers. However, that would likely strengthen your application, but that's definitely not a requirement. And one other thing to note is that in order to be eligible, you have to be domestically owned and your facilities must be physically located within the US Virgin Islands. All right, so we have two different types of grants that you can apply for. You can choose one or the other. You cannot apply for both. The first is infrastructure grants, which are more project-based and they're larger. And the second are equipment-only grants, and those are focused only on purchasing equipment, and they're a bit smaller. And I'll go over both of them, but we'll start with infrastructure grants. So these grants will range in value from a minimum of $100,000 and a maximum of $500,000. One of the things to be mindful of with the infrastructure grants is that they do require a match, and they require a 50% match of the total proposed project. If you qualify as any of those kind of listed groups that we went over in a previous slide, then your organization could qualify for a reduced match of 25% of your total proposed project cost. So the award amount is only the federal contribution amount, not your total project cost. The matching and everything can be a little confusing. So let's say you have a project that is $200,000 total to do the project. If you qualify as only the 50% match level, which means you don't fall under any of the underserved groups, then you would put in 100,000 yourself. And then this grant could give you 100,000 for a total of 200,000. But if you do qualify for the reduced match of 25%, you have the same project total of $200,000. You would only have to put in 50,000, which is 25% of the 200,000. And then this grant could cover 150,000. And the matching funds can be cash or they can be in kind. So that could be anything from a bank loan, people donating their time. There's a, it's pretty flexible with how you can meet that match. The matching funds do have to be in place by the time of the award. So that would be no earlier than March 1 of next year. But keep in mind that if you are submitting an infrastructure grant, you do have to include letters within your application certifying that the match would be available at that time. And there's a template for that on the website. And that's for both cash and in kind. For each different contribution, there is a letter required for each of those. And in order to qualify for the reduced match, it's just a self-certification. There's not actually any documentation that you have to provide, but once you go through that online tool, you can determine if you qualify or not, and then it's a checkbox on the application to certify that you do qualify. And the other thing I'll note is that there's no restrictions on like how much you would use cash, how much you would use in kind. You could use both, you could use one or the other, as long as they total whatever your match needs to be. Okay. So project types. These are the different kinds of projects that you could apply for through the infrastructure grant. Reminder that the period of performance for these is March of 2025, so March 1 of next year, through December 31 of 2026. So you have most of 2025 and all of 2026 to complete these projects. So some of the examples of different project types would be expanding processing capacities, including adding product types, increasing production volumes, and supporting new wholesale product lines, modernizing equipment or facilities, purchase and installation of specialized equipment, such as sorting equipment, packing, labeling equipment, or delivery vehicles, modernizing manufacturing, tracking, storage, and information technology systems, enhancing worker safety through new technologies or new equipment or facility improvements, construction of a new facility. One thing I'll note for this to be mindful of is if this is something you have in mind, is anytime there's kind of construction and ground disturbing activities, there's often permitting that needs to happen locally before any work can actually begin. So just be mindful of that and build that into your timeline. Increasing packaging and labeling capacities that meet compliance requirements, increasing storage space, including cold storage, develop, customize, or install climate smart equipment, and modernizing equipment or facilities. Now, just keep in mind, these are the project types that they're kind of offering as examples, but they all have to be tied back to middle of the supply chain activities only. If you go to our website, which Demi put in the chat earlier, we do also have a list on there of eligible activities to give you some more like specific examples. I'll read through a couple of allowable activities that could, be something you consider, such as hiring term limited personnel to help you implement some of these project ideas, purchasing special purpose equipment that will benefit multiple producers or just one producer through, maybe it's increasing your processing capacity, analyzing facility upgrades and any changes that you might need in order to meet different regulatory requirements, planning for any hazard analysis or food worker safety. So if you want to implement training programs, maybe you're purchasing new equipment and then you need to train workers on how to use that equipment, that could be eligible. Upgrading facilities, post-harvest cleaning and grading, aggregator warehouse and storage, which includes cooperatives. Purchasing drying equipment, freezing equipment, freezer or cold storage. Again, vehicles are eligible. So if it was, like a cold delivery truck, that would be allowable. Processing, canning, preserving and pasteurization, preparation and packing, drying, hulling, shelling, milling, cooking, baking, juicing, distilling, and fermenting. Again, all of those are listed on our website, so you don't have to remember everything, but I just wanted to read through some of those. Demi, how are we doing? Do we have some questions?
Yes, we have one that came in a couple minutes ago and then one that just came in. The first one is asking, would hemp-made items be eligible for funding? That is after it is out of the ground from the VI and it needs to be processed into a final product, but before it goes on a retail market.
Yes, so hemp is kind of in a gray area as long as it's intended for human consumption, but it's not like a health supplement type product. There is a slide that I'll go through that kind of speaks to that. But hemp could be eligible as long as it's not being sold or distributed as like a health supplement.
And then the next question is, what is the feasibility of using this funding to launch a project aimed at creating a community-supported agriculture project that would touch on multiple points of the supply chain, such as aggregation, storage, and distribution, as well as retail and marketing?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you can apply for up to $500,000 with the infrastructure grants. So a big project like that would be great. Just keep in mind the retail and marketing would not be allowable. It would have to be focused on only the middle of the supply chain activities that you mentioned.
Does the applicant need to have all the FSMA requirements in place in order to apply?
So I don't know what FSMA stands for. However, I'm guessing it's some kind of maybe worker safety or specific regulations for a facility. Um, Not necessarily. I mean, if you're somewhere new and you need help getting those things in place, then you could consider applying, to get training to help you get certifications and to meet different requirements, as long as you meet the eligibility requirements.
And then this last one, I'm not sure if it's because of the page we're on, but it's asking if the requirements cover both the grants.
General eligibility applies to both grants, yes. I will get to some more detail about the equipment only grants. I'll say generally infrastructure grants have a lot more flexibility than the equipment only grants. As they kind of sound, equipment only is only for purchasing equipment. It's not for doing any projects. So you couldn't do training, you couldn't update facilities or do any kind of analyzing of things that need to be upgraded. That would all fall under infrastructure. But in general, anything that is talking about middle of the supply chain requirements does apply to both grants.
And then the last one is just the clarity on the FSME, which is the Food Safety Modernization Act of 2011, which was a significant legislative policy intended to improve the security and safety of the U.S. food supply.
Okay, yeah, thank you for clarifying that. So yeah, you do not necessarily have to have that in place already in order to apply. That could be what you're applying for, is to get some funding to help you meet these different requirements. Yeah, exactly. I see the next one. The things listed will help you meet these different requirements. So yeah. I see question. Sorry, Demi, I'll just jump in.
No, go ahead.
Is there any preference for locally consumed products versus products made for export? I mean, ideally, we're strengthening the local producers. So, I don't think we have anything written that says if you're exporting it, it's not allowed. I think they would be potentially equally considered, but I would definitely focus on local markets more. All right, we answered this one. I see another one. I see you're answering it, Demi, but I'll go ahead and say it while you're typing. There's a question, will there be multiple rounds of funding released? We don't know yet. So we have a total of 1.5 million to award, and it's gonna depend on what kind of applications we get and how much gets approved for funding. So, if we get to a point where we've made those awards and we still have money left, then yes, we would do another cycle. It would be all of the same requirements that we're going over here, same eligibility, but the period of performance would then be shorter depending on when we open the next round of funding, because everything has to be done by December of 2026. All right, I think that's most of our questions for now, so I will move on to the next one. So the simplified equipment only grant. So this is the second type of grant that you could apply for. And again, you can only apply for one or the other. You cannot apply for both of them. So these grants will range in value from a minimum of $10,000 and a maximum of $100,000, and they do not require any cost sharing or matching. So that's what's great about these ones. You don't have to bring any of your own money or in-kind donations. This grant would be a fixed price grant, meaning it's only funding equipment purchases. It's not funding any work that has to go along with these equipment. and the amount awarded would be equal to the cost of the equipment up to $100,000. So that could be multiple pieces of equipment, it could be one piece of equipment. Applicants have to submit documentation to substantiate the cost of each piece of equipment listed on their application. And the cost of delivery and installation can be covered by the grant, but only if they are listed in your official bid. So let's say you submit an application, you submit one bid with your application, it includes cost of delivery and installation, then that, if you were selected for funding, that is what you could use the money for. If you only get a bid that says the cost of the equipment, doesn't include like freight or shipping charges, doesn't include installation, you would get it approved for only the cost of the equipment, and then you would have to take on any delivery costs that might be associated with it. There's no requirement to submit, multiple different bids. You would just submit the one that you would want to go with. But our recommendation and just general best practice, especially when you're buying any piece of equipment that's a significant amount of money, is to do your research and get at least 3 different quotes just to make sure that you're getting the most reasonable and cost-efficient one. The other recommendation is that when you get a bid, make sure that it's eligible for more than just 30 days, so that you might submit your application this month, but no funding would come through until the earliest would be March of next year. So you want to make sure that bid is eligible throughout that whole time period. We have some questions come up, Demi.
Yes. The most recent 2, is there any preference for locally consumed products versus products made for export?
I think we answered that one already.
Oh, okay. And then someone is wondering, what are the chances a private school might have if the goal is an agricultural program, so growing, marketing, and selling?
If you're an eligible applicant and the project is focused on middle of the supply chain activities, then you can apply. It's going to be very competitive. I'll get to the kind of evaluation criteria later, but you can see, if you read the request for proposals on our website, you can see how we're going to evaluate everything. And then we're also going to prioritize those things that resulted from the surveys we did earlier this year. So that's really the only, preference is underserved groups, socially disadvantaged groups, and the specific program priorities that we highlighted. Otherwise, if you're eligible, apply. We don't know how many applications we get or we will get. I imagine it will be pretty competitive. We obviously want to fund as much as we can, but we have limited funding. So, we're happy to talk through anything with you. If you want to reach out and kind of explain what you're thinking, we're happy to chat with you. All right, no other questions, it looks like. The application process. So the applications opened on October 21st, and they are going to close on December. It's actually December 5th. So sorry about that, everyone. December 5th is actually the deadline. We will hopefully be able to extend it. We don't know for sure yet. We know that's a pretty tight timeline, but we have to run everything by USDA. So keep December 5 in your memory for now. That's what's listed on the website. But we will let everybody know if there's any extensions. The application documents are on our website. They are PDF documents. We've had some folks reach out with trouble accessing them. Let me know if you have trouble. I'm happy to kind of send you a different version, but you do need to have Adobe Reader at a minimum downloaded, and then you can download the document from our website and then upload it. Open it on your computer, and it's a fillable PDF form. These PDF documents must be submitted via email, along with any supporting documentation. So, if you're getting letters to verify matches, if you're doing equipment, you're submitting bids, anything else that might be required, and it's just via email to rfsi@cfbi.net. And one big thing to be mindful of is that everyone who applies is required to have a unique entity ID, or also known as a UEI, through sam.gov. So if your organization or entity does not have that, please go ahead and start that process today. It can take a little bit of time. It depends on how busy the government people are. It's free. There are a few different websites out there that are kind of scam websites, and they'll make you pay for it. It's totally free, so please don't pay anybody. And it's pretty straightforward. It's just that it can take some time to process. So please do start that if you haven't already gotten that number. It's basically just a number that the government assigns to you, the federal government assigns to you, so they can track kind of awards that might go to you and what you've been doing. We got some questions, Demi?
Yes. Is there a way to see the response to the survey that you completed? And can we get a copy of the webinar sent to attendees for guidance?
Okay. I actually don't know if we're allowed to share the survey responses, but Demi, can you flag that for us and we can follow up? If we did, or it's so long ago, I don't recall what happened. Can we get a copy of the webinar? Yes, so we're actually recording this webinar and we'll be posting it on our website and YouTube channel, so you'll be able to access it at any time. And we will also email the recording and the PowerPoint slides to everyone who registered. And those will also be put onto the website. All right, are these grants individual eligible? I think you're asking if an individual can apply, as long as you fall, if you're a farmer with your agricultural producer, then yes, you could apply as long as you meet all of the other eligibility requirements. All right, I think that's, oh. Is the grant by reimbursement or does it allow advance payments? Great question. So primarily everything will be reimbursement. However, we understand that this is a big chunk of money and not everyone has that kind of cash flow to work with. So we will really be doing more of a case-by-case basis. Some of the options might be that you can kind of invoice us as frequently as needed. So maybe, you figured out exactly what equipment to purchase, everything's ready to go. You invoice us, we could send the money, you send us the proof of payment, and then you're good to go. Alternatively, if you're doing infrastructure grants, then, the thinking is that you would use your matching to get everything started and then request reimbursements as often as you need them. Just keep in mind that payments can sometimes take a little while because CFVI does not receive all of this money up front. We have to request it each time a recipient needs money. So it kind of has to go through multiple levels each time. Does purchasing solar equipment, is that eligible? Sure, so solar equipment would be eligible so long as that solar equipment is only being used to support middle of the supply chain activities. Everything has to tie back to being middle of the supply chain, and the products that you're working with also have to be eligible. So there's nothing that says solar equipment is not eligible. It's just how is that solar equipment going to be used? Can you use land as matching? Land. Is this like someone's providing, kind of renting out land? I'm not sure. Demi, can you write that one down? And I'm not sure about that. I'm gonna lean and say probably not. But if there's maybe like a warehouse space that normally would be rented, but let's say someone is donating to you use of that space, that could be eligible to help you meet the match. Does in-kind service constitute the percentage of matching funds? I'm not quite sure I understand that question. Maybe if you want to clarify in another Q&A question. But for the matching, yes, you can use in-kind and or actual cash. It doesn't matter how much of each, as long as you're meeting the match requirement, which is going to be either the 50% or the 25% if you qualify for the reduced match. Some grants allow you to use the mortgage of the farmland as matching. Interesting. We will have to look into that. I don't know about that, but Demi, if you can make sure to flag that one for us as well. Yeah, we can definitely get an answer for that. And anything that we don't have an answer to now, we will send a follow-up email to everyone that registered. So it's going to include the recording, the presentation, and if there were any questions asked that we said we didn't have an answer to right away, hopefully we'll be able to get an answer within the next couple days, and then include that in the email. What defines a farmer? So I would go to our website and then go to the bottom where there are links to the USDA website, and they have specific definitions for all of these types of things. And I can show you that too when I get to our next few slides. Can a group or entity help write grants for local farmers? Is this cost allowable under the grant, or would we have to pay it? If so, can it be used as a match? No, any costs incurred prior to the period of performance, which starts March 1 of 2025, would not be eligible. So that would be at your own cost if you're paying someone to help you write grants, or even if someone's donating their time, none of that could be included towards the matching requirements. All right, looks like we've got through those questions. I just want to go over the competitive review process briefly, and then I will show you the website and the different resources that are on there. So these grants will be awarded through a competitive review process. So if you apply, that does not necessarily mean that you're going to get funded. It does have to go through a bunch of different steps. So the first step is going to be an internal eligibility review by CFBI staff. So that is us making sure that the applicant is eligible and that the project is eligible. And then there would be an external review by an external review committee. So this committee will be made up of different people that are familiar with the territory and the agricultural world within the territory and have that local context and understanding. And then once that committee evaluates everything, the ones that we decide that we want to fund have to then be sent back to the USDA for their approval by their review board as well. So the review process can take a little bit of time, hence why the period of performance does not start until March 1 of 2025. And your program and all funds have to be spent by December 31 of 2026. What if the amount is greater than 500,000? You would have to cover that. You'd have to find other funds or another way to cover that. Our awards will only be the maximum for infrastructure would be 500,000. You know, we have to be careful that you're not duplicating federal funding anywhere. So maybe you have bank loans or things like that. You might be able to help kind of cover any overage there. But you'd want to make sure that you're not getting another federal grant somewhere or another reimbursement somewhere for the exact same costs, because that would not be allowed. Alrighty. I don't see any more questions, so I just want to show everybody the CFBI website. So when you come to our website initially, it'll bring you to this page. And then you can come to nonprofits and go to RFSI program right here. Everything you need is on this page. It's a lot of information. It's a lot of text. I know it's such a pain to read through all of this stuff, but like with any kind of federal program, there's just so many rules, requirements, guidelines. So it's really important that you read through everything, take the time to read through everything. But of course, we're happy to answer questions as well. So a lot of what I've gone over already in our PowerPoints is listed here. We've got kind of overview of the program, the request for applications. This is a really, really important document for everybody to read. It will link you to this PDF form that gives you an overview, a summary of the different funding. It has links to the different websites where you can do self-certifications. It also has eligibility requirements, and again, links to SBA website so you can determine what you qualify, theater performance, funding information, reporting information, a good amount of information about the matching requirements and the different funding priorities as well. And then further down, there's more examples of eligible and ineligible projects. So you could read through those to get some ideas of what's allowed and what's not allowed. I will note that purchasing land is not allowed. And then a little bit about the review process, including how everything is being reviewed, like what we're scoring it on. It's always great to look at that to understand how it will be reviewed. So that's a really important document I encourage everyone to read. And then each of these two are the actual application documents themselves. And if you scroll down, we've kind of got, you know, all the information about the infrastructure grants and the actual application itself. Again, the application is a PDF and it's all fillable, so you can fill in these forms. And then you scroll further down, same thing for the equipment only grants. You have access to the application right here. Same, it's a different form from infrastructure, but it's very similar. And again, it's all fillable. And then we have resources down here at the bottom, for example, evidence of critical resource. Further up here, there's the match verification. So this is if you have any matches, you do have to have a letter documenting each of those and how you will meet the match. And we have more resources down right here. So we have FAQ document. There's a lot of frequently asked questions in there. A question you have is probably listed in there somewhere. There is program scope and requirements specific for RFSI. There's also terms and conditions, as well as the USDA general rules. And then there's some resources about getting your unique entity ID. That's the UEI number that you have to have in order to apply. The size standards tool to help you know if you qualify as a small business, and the underserved farmers and ranchers to let you know all the different definitions and what you might qualify as, and the SBA website here as well. And if you have any questions, you can send us an email right here to rfsi@cfei.net. So with that, we will now open it up to questions. I know it's a lot of information. We ran through it pretty quickly. We're happy to answer questions now, or we have our email right up here as well that you're welcome to email us at any time and we will get back to you as soon as we can. It looks like we have a question here. Under the smaller grant opportunity, so I'm thinking equipment only is what you're referring to. Can tractors, implements, and farm equipment be acquired? It depends on the purpose of the equipment, right? So it has to go back to middle of the supply chain usage. So if you're buying equipment for harvesting, no, that's not allowed because that's not middle of the supply chain. If you're buying equipment for processing, for washing, dehydrating, you know, all of those different options, then yes, that would be allowed. All right. Don't see any other questions coming in, but if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A. That is the whole presentation that we have to share with you, but I want to make sure we answer any more questions that folks have. So we'll hang out here for, you know, another 5 10 minutes maybe. Feel free to hop off if you want to. You can have some time back in your day. Again, we will follow up with the recording and the PowerPoint and answers to some questions that we should be able to get in the next few days. I did see another question. Could two separate entities apply for the two separate opportunities in order to complement each other working together? Sure, as long as you're not applying for funding any of the same things, because we want to avoid that duplication of federal funding. But yes, if there's one entity that has its own UEI number and they're doing an infrastructure project, and then maybe there's another entity that with their own unique entity ID, maybe they're buying equipment, so they apply for the equipment only grant, and it will be used in a cooperative space, a community space. I think that would be fine. Just keep in mind that the person applying for the equipment only can only use the funds to purchase the equipment and to cover shipping charges. And, you know, for installation, one thing that's kind of annoying with the equipment only grants is it's really, can it be plugged in and it's ready to go? That's what they consider installation. If you have to build a concrete pad, if you have to redo some wiring, none of that would be allowed. And then I would say you should submit an infrastructure grant application, and then you would try and incorporate more things rather than just buying the equipment. You could buy the equipment, maybe install things that need to be installed and do training. Equipment only question. Can this piece of equipment be used for more than just middle of the supply chain purposes if it has that capability? Demi, can you flag this? I'm pretty sure that it can only be for middle of the supply chain use. That's kind of, you know, the whole niche of the program. I want to double check that though to make sure I'm telling you the right thing, but I'm like 99% sure that's the answer. No, an applicant cannot apply for both grants. You can only choose infrastructure or equipment only. I'm not sure I understand the question. An infrastructure grant cannot be brick and mortar. You could build something with an infrastructure grant. Construction is allowed. And you could still purchase equipment within the infrastructure grant. It's just that you would make it a project rather than just buying equipment and plug and play that equipment. All right, I don't see any more questions coming in, but we'll wait a few more minutes in case anyone thinks of anything. I'll also add, we are planning to do some webinars and trainings on the actual applications themselves. Likely it would be early December. But we will publicize it when we have the dates for that finalized. And again, we're hoping to be able to extend the deadline past December 5 as well. All right. Well, if there are no other questions, I think we can go ahead and close out. Again, our email is right here, so please feel free to reach out to us. We are here to help. We want you to have successful proposals. So any questions, please send them to us. If we don't know the answer, we will get the answer. We work very closely with the USDA folks.
We just
No
had
worries.
2.
Yeah. What is considered upgrading a facility? It could be, maybe there are some regulatory requirements that you don't currently meet and you need to upgrade equipment or something within your facility in order to be able to meet those. That could be an example. I would encourage you to read through the different kind of eligible activity options on the website, and that should give you some good ideas. I think that Dale might have one more question, so we'll see. Wait for a minute and see if that comes in. And again, we'll post this recording on our website and email it out to everyone, so it will live on for a while. Don't feel like you have to remember everything that we went over. I know it's a lot of information, and we are learning along with everybody else and every other state and territory that has this funding. It's been a learning process for everybody, but I'm excited to be able to get this money out into the territory. Oh, here it is, just in time. If a modular unit or container can be customized for the grant being ready to operate. I think I'm gonna make an assumption here that you're talking about maybe you could buy like a shipping container and that's helping you process foods or aggregate foods in some way. Yes, I think you could apply for probably an infrastructure grant with that. I have no idea what the cost of containers like that would be. I don't know that 100,000 would cover it. But yeah, I mean, as long as, the purpose of the container is middle of the supply chain activities, then sure, you could apply. You're welcome. All right, well, thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time to join us today. Please do reach out if you have any questions. I know this can be very confusing and overwhelming. We're here to help. We want to be helpful and we want to answer questions that you might have. An email is the best way to get in touch with us. So thank you again, and we will follow up with an email, hopefully by the end of this week, with the recordings and presentations and everything. And yes, you could also feel free to call the office. Our office is on St. Thomas. However, both Demi and I work remotely. So you can call the office, but they're just going to tell you to send us an email. So please just start with the email and then we can always set up a phone call from there. All right. Thanks so much, everyone. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.